I think nobody is better than Vazir sir. Very beautifully, in very simple and plain language, generally he used to teach us. And whatever little knowledge which we have today, or whatever our livelihood from trust activities, I think it is the credit goes to mainly Vazir sir. Because this topic trust has not been taught during our CA, studies in a deeper manner. I think we have not learned lots of taxation provisions during our
Yes, yes.
training period. But because of these kind of teachers, today we are able to practice in this particular area. Friends, there are two things which have really impressed me a lot in the CV or profile of Vajay sir. First thing is that what a versatile personality he has, and how gradually he has changed his life from materialism to spiritualism. That kind of combination, that kind of beauty is there with Vajay sir. See, my materialism should not be continued for whole life. That I have understood now. Gradually from E.A. Patil sir or Chandrasekhar Vajay sir, definitely we have to earn money, we have to feed our family. But when our requirements are over, or when it is content, we should keep it contented so that we can gradually shift into different life pattern. And that is what is being reflected in his profile also. Vajay sir is in practice since 1980, and he has he has delivered several lectures, written articles on taxation, banking and allied subjects, code of ethics of CA in various forums. He has participated in discussion in radio and television as well. He has pleaded cases of misconduct before disciplinary committee, council, appellate authority, etc. He has delivered lectures and written articles on now. Now the pattern is changing. He has delivered lectures and written articles on Valmiki Ramayana, no, Mahabharat, and many other social subjects. Just now he is sharing his experience that he can present a very good lecture on Valmiki Ramayana, and that is what we will also listen to it from his mouth. He has anchored musical and other cultural programs. He has directed plays in Sanskrit language and also worked for program of Sanskrit language. He is the trustee and ex-president of Maharashtra Seva Sangh, Mulund. He is the president of Sanskrit Bharati Konkan Prant. He was the chairman of Jan Kalyan Sahkari Bank Limited, and presently I think he is a director into that bank. He has held many responsible positions in many organizations. Now the third limb of his life is yoga, I think. That is the reason why he's so fit, and he always looks very, thin, lean and thin. He is the recipient of Yoga Mitra Award from Yoga Vidya Niketan Vashi, Yoga Vidya Niketan Vashi. He is the recipient of Best Social Worker Award from Senior Citizen Association Mulund, and he is the recipient of Best Feature Writer Award for feature on ethics in BC General. His profile is very brief, but his personality is very big. He has purposely not given so many other things, his achievements. With this brief introduction, Vajay sir, we are eager to hear you on this trust topic, that is taxability of trust. Sir, the topic is yours. The platform of this virtual platform is yours. Please take care further.
Namaskar and good morning to all of you. In fact, today
Namaskar.
today is Teachers' Day, so happy Teachers' Day because all of us are teachers in some sense or the other. In fact, now the younger generation is our teacher because we need to learn so many things from them.
Yes.
So, as a formal address, I must thank Santoshji Sharma, who was very kind enough to introduce me in very generous words. Mr. Rajendra Phadke, who coordinated with me for this particular presentation. And in fact, Navi Mumbai, next to Mulund, because Mulund, I must say, is my home pitch, but next to Mulund, my allegiance or my belonging, sense of belonging is to Navi Mumbai. Because almost every year, for some reason or the other, I have been coming there and having discussions with you or making some presentation or the other. There is a long list of friends whom I know. Satish Chanbag is there, M. Shetty, Jayant Adhyapak, I don't know whether they are present, or Manoj Pandey, Sanjay Nikam, and Suresh Ameria, Jayant Tandel, Harshal Ajmera, and all these I know one by one-to-one basis. Then Sanjay Bhujbal is there, Abhishek Shah, E.A. Patil sir, and Samir Gavli, last but not the least, and his partner Tandey. You know, many, dozens of them I know very personally and on a one-to-one basis. Anyway, let's start with the topic. The topic is normally, as Santoshi rightly mentioned, that earlier at the time of exam, we used to keep it for option, particularly final C of our generation people, because it is so complicated. And nowadays, every year after year, it is becoming more and more complicated. I'll just make my PPT available and then I'll speak. I'll start talking. Actually, the background about this topic is that the charitable trust as an entity nowadays is not much favored by the government authority, because under the garb of charity, many unscrupulous and undesirable things are being done by the antisocial element, and therefore government is not very enthusiastic or encouraging this particular charitable trust as an entity. The fact is very clear and very obvious that since they are enjoying tax exemptions, there are many people to take undue advantage of that, and therefore government is very particular, and therefore for the registration of the trust under section 12 AA, and now it will become 12 AB, the rate of rejection is more than 85 to 90% rate of rejection of the application, and it is a Herculean task to obtain registration. Another very peculiar feature about this topic is that so far, right in 1961, when the act was originally introduced, the normal other provisions get stabilized at least for 3 4 years, and then there is an amendment. But this is a chapter, taxation of charitable trust is such a chapter which there is not a single year in which there was no amendment to it. So every year there is some amendment or the other, and the government tries to plug loopholes. What the people are taking undue advantage of these things, government is trying to plug the loopholes. Just give me a minute. So with this, we will start the topic proper. The PPT is there, I think, being now the basic provisions of the taxation of charitable trusts are contained in chapter 3A of the Income Tax Act. And these charitable entities, basically there are three types of entities in which usually the charity is done.
Sir, you are on PPT or you are PPT?
No, PPT is just, I think there is some technical hitch coming in that.
Okay, so
Just give me a minute. Just give me a minute. It is being done.
please.
Screen आलं. Okay, is my PPT visible now? Hello?
No, sir.
No, sir. PPT is not visible. Your
inbox.
mail is visible. Mail.
Yeah, Gmail
Yeah.
inbox is visible.
ठीक है 1 minute. अच्छा, till that time, whatever I can speak without PPT, that I will start. Then we can come switch over to PPT once it is available.
In 2 minutes.
हाँ.
सर उसमें जब शेयर स्क्रीन का नीचे एक ऑप्शन आ रहा होगा सर नीचे
हाँ. What is
शेयर
that?
स्क्रीन, और उसमें लेफ्ट में टॉप मोस्ट वाला स्क्रीन सेलेक्ट कीजिएगा.
अच्छा.
लेफ्ट में टॉप मोस्ट
ओके, लेफ्ट में टॉप में।
स्क्रीन वर्ड स्क्रीन लिखा हुआ आ रहा होगा वहां पे
हाँ,
स्क्रीन।
एक मिनिट, मी लीव मीटिंग करतो आणि परत जॉईन होतो. पण बेसिकली टीचर, at least I am audible, no?
Yes,
sir.
very much.
In fact, in present times, because we always respect the teachers and gurus, but the present time, what is the perception of the student, that is very interesting. Once a teacher came in the class and he gave a big lecture on the importance of mother. So माँ कितनी श्रेष्ठ होती है उसका उसने बताया. All the students were dozing as usual, क्योंकि as usual it was a boring lecture. And then when the lecture was over, he made one backbencher stand up and he said, "Hey, you there, to tell me that now that I have explained to you the importance of mother for such a long time, tell me who is greater, who is superior, mother or guru, a mentor or ma?" So that boy stood up, he was dozing as usual, and he said, "Guruji, what a question. Actually, Guru only is superior." He said, the teacher was very much puzzled. Are, for 1 full hour I explained the importance of mother and he is saying Guru is superior. He said, "Why do you say so?" And the student said, "Guruji, the answer is so simple. A mother can put to sleep only one child at a time." So now we switch over to the technicalities. Now see, basically there are 3 entities. Simultaneously that email is being sent to you by my colleague. So there are 3 entities under which normally a charitable institution functions. One is the one which is commonly known as charitable trust. Trust is normally registered under the Public Trusts Act, but remember that all the states are not having their respective state Public Trust Act. Maharashtra, Gujarat are having, but Andhra, Karnataka, there are many states where there is no local Public Trust Act. So the state act is not there at all. The governments feel that there is no need to regulate the charity, the state respective state governments. So in Maharashtra and Gujarat, the Public Trust Act is there. But otherwise, the normal all India level act is the Indian means Societies Registration Act, which is of 1860. That is of Britishers' time. Britishers were very wise. They had made only 2 acts. One was 1860 Act, which was Societies Registration Act, and the other was the Indian Trust Act. But many people are not aware of the fact that Indian Trust Act deals only with the private trust. Therefore, in fact, in South, there is so much of ignorance that they register all the trusts under the Indian Trust Act. But there is no regulatory authority and there is no, it is not available in public domain. It is the trust deed is simply registered just as we register our, agreement for sale, purchase of property. That way the trusts are registered. So an outsider cannot have an inspection as to who are the trustees or what kind of objects are there. I think it has been sent, the PPT has been sent to you.
Okay, sir.
So this is first category, that trusts. Then I'll also explain to you what is the difference between a trust and a society. The other category is Societies Registration Act under 1860 Act, and a society normally is like a corporate entity because there 7 persons are required to form a society. And then it functions also like that. So what is the distinction mainly, effective distinction between trust and society is that, under a trust can be formed only by 1 or 2 persons, like settler. It is called a settler or the author of the trust, founder of the trust. They could be only 1 or 2 persons. And then they appoint the trustees. And then the trustees are entrusted with the task of managing the trust. And the property is entrusted to the trustees. Now in this relationship, the whatever are the objects clause of the trust, there is sanctity to that, because that is the will or desire of a particular person. And whereas it is like, in a will, suppose we prepare a will or a mrityu patra or ichha patra, what we call it, there is a sanctity to the sentiments expressed by the testator. Similarly, when a trust is formed, a charitable trust is formed, then it goes out of the control of even the settlor. And therefore, if any objects are to be changed, then it is necessarily through the court's intervention. So the changing of objects of a charitable trust is a very complicated process, because then you are now deviating from one particular person had already directed you to do. Now, the good example of this is that once three persons, old persons from Thane came to me, and they said ki we want to change the objects of the trust. I said, what are the objects? They said, actually the trust was formed by one very old Parsi gentleman 100 years ago, and it says that he wants to help the poor Parsis in Thane district. But then he said there are no poor Parsis in Thane district we come across. So you want to widen it. But I said, no, you cannot disturb the sentiments of that particular settler. It is without in court's intervention, you cannot change the objects. Unlike that, for a society, since it is democratically formed, the process of changing the objects also becomes fairly simple, because then it is not just as we change the objects of a company. Similarly, the objects of the society can also be changed. We, of course, the registrar and other formalities are there, but it is a little simpler process. So this is one important distinction that we need to keep in mind. Then the third category in which the particular charitable activity is done is Section 8 company, which was previously Section 25 company of the Companies Act 56. Now Section 8 company is essentially under the Central Act. So also society's registration is also under the Central Act. But the Public Trust Act, Maharashtra Public Trust Act, is under the State Act. Another important thing which one needs to keep in mind is that every society has to compulsorily get registered as a trust in the Charity Commissioner's office, that is a charitable trust. Only then the Charity Commissioner assumes jurisdiction on that. So every society, then it's a very simple procedure. Once it is registered, then the registration under the Public Trust Act with the Charity Commissioner is a fairly simple procedure, but there it is necessarily to be done. The other way around is not possible or not necessary, in the sense every trust need not be a society, but every society has to be registered as a trust. Now, the normally I will be speaking not only the taxation, but also in the course of audit, what we need to bear in mind. The charitable purpose is of course important in that, but the purpose is very important when we are doing the rendering any services to the trust, be it an audit, be it an taxation. I'll give you a very interesting example. In fact, when there was this tsunami calamity, certain people who were running a charitable school in our Mulund, they were very dedicated people. It was a more than 60-year-old institution, and it was exclusively into education. So they were running a this particular school and college, and they approached me and they said they wanted to help the tsunami hit people. That means in general they want to contribute something for their rehabilitation. But then I told them, because we were the auditors, I told them that this is not covered in your objects. Your objects are exclusively for education. Now, exclusively for education means there cannot be anything else. But then what, there is a way out, because otherwise one has to put a remark. As an auditor, I have to put a remark that this is outside or this is contrary to their objects clause. Now, what was the way out? Way out was that I advised them that if at all there is any school or any educational institution in the tsunami hit area, then you can give your donation to that particular institution for the rehabilitation or reconstruction of the school building, so that both the purposes are achieved. You help the tsunami hit people, but your purpose of education is also kept intact. So this is the thing, because unfortunately I have seen that many professionals, chartered accountants, who try to render service to any entity, but they never study basic objects or basic constitution of that particular entity. Even partnership deed or even the trust or the company, in our audit book, we always mention that there should be a permanent audit file. But unfortunately, the object clause and other things are not very regularly studied by the chartered accountant himself. So the question of his articles or his assistant studying that doesn't arise. But then we have to be very careful about the objects clause. And unfortunate part is that because of this computerization, the drafting has become so simple that they just copy paste the everything and then they come into trouble. Those also examples I will be giving you in the course of my talk. Now there are, next is charitable purpose. Somebody is now operating the screen. Hello? Hello?
Sir, we are downloading it. In next few minutes, you will get it.
Okay, okay.
Sir,
Good.
downloading it.
Good.
In a minute, I am just going to display it.
ठीक है. By that time, I will be dealing with some other topics. So
continue for 5 more minutes, then we will get it.
No problem. Now there are, under the Income Tax Act, charitable purposes are defined. The charitable purpose is defined in section 2, clause 15. And charitable purpose means what? There are 7 categories. One is relief of the poor, then the education, then yoga, then medical relief, then preservation of environment, including watersheds, forests, etc., preservation of monuments or archaeological or historic structures, and the last one is advancement of any other object of general public utility. Now there is a very clear distinction between the first 6 categories on one hand and the last one, that is general public utility. And that next amendment which they brought somewhere in the year 2009 was very dangerous amendment. I think the screen has come now. So we are on 3rd or 4th slide, charitable purpose. So we are on the charitable part, yes. Relief of the poor, education, yoga, medical relief. Then the next is, next slide. Preservation of environment, which I just mentioned, then preservation of monuments and advance. Now what is the peculiarity of this last 7th category is that up to the first 6 categories, you can have any income, like you can even charge for the services, you can charge for the products, you can charge for anything that you do in those 6 categories. For example, the school you cannot run without charging the fees. Hospital you cannot run without charging the fees. For yoga also you can charge. For preservation of environment, for example, you go for jungle safari or you go to see a museum, etc. So that also you can pay and the trust can charge the fees. But when it comes to the last category, that means advancement of other objects of general public utility, there is a restriction on the charging the fees for the services that you render. And that, what is that restriction? That the fees which you collect or the service charges that you collect for anything for which you render to the other people or public, that amount should not exceed 20% of the total collection of the trust. So for example, there could be interest, there could be donations, there could be other rent received. All these incomes are there for a trust. And in that, they are rendering a particular service or they are selling some product. Take for example, it is a Mahila Shram or a Vruddha or an orphanage. In that, their inmates may be producing something which you are selling. Now if you are selling, then that particular sale proceeds should not exceed 20% of your total collections or total income. That means rent, interest, donations and all those things. If you do that, means if your total collection exceeds that, then you are no longer treated as charitable. Now this is a very, very dicey, very dangerous provision, and particularly the institutions which are hit by this are, and there here also one has to be very careful about this, because then as an auditor and as a finance consultant or a tax consultant of any institution, one should be very careful with what just now I will be talking. That is, the trusts who are having the premises as a hall, which is they rent out, if they are renting it out, then one should be very careful in declaring it as income from house property only. If you are doing any other or rendering any other service, like you are having a marriage hall, for example, a charitable trust is having a marriage hall, and then if you are charging rent for that, but then so long as you are charging only rent, then we have an argument to say that it is just income from house property. But if you are also rendering service like decoration, or the catering or any other thing, if you are rendering it to the customers, then it is very likely that it will be treated as a service charges or something like a contract for like a business contract, and then you may lose the exemption. So one has to be very careful in presenting the income, and it is always advisable that these particular other services like maintenance or even catering or decoration, they are either outsourced or there for some different entities there for that. So this is one point one needs to be very carefully keeping in mind. Now, next, next slide. So charitable purpose, there is now many people ask whether a trust can do business, and the answer is yes. The trust can always do business, except this particular clause which I am talking is that there is an exception provided that the activity undertaken is in the course of actual carrying out such advancement of means the general object of public utility. Now, for example, there is a school. Now, school is of course on a different footing because for education this particular proviso does not apply. But a typical example is that school may be having a book shop or a stationery shop, or a hospital medical trust may be having a pharmacy, a chemist shop. Of course, this example is not apt in the sense that as it is for hospital and schools, this particular dangerous provision does not apply. But I am just giving you as an example as to what will be the incidental activity. So aggregate and the aggregate receipts of this activity do not exceed 20% of the total receipts. So this is the condition. But I was talking on the trust doing business other than this. Now trust is permitted to do business provided there are two conditions. In fact, section 11.4 and 11.4a directly deal with the activity of business done in the trust. Section 11.4 says that if you are, and this is also very interesting and very important, what happens is if a particular business undertaking itself is settled on trust, just as see we have properties, we have building, we have gold, we have shares, we have monies or actually fixed deposits, any property can be settled on trust. So suppose someone has an industrial undertaking or a business enterprise. So what he says is that up to age of 60 I have earned enough. Now all this industrial undertaking I want to settle it on trust so that henceforth all the profits of this particular undertaking will be given to the charity. That means it is the business undertaking is itself a property. It is itself settled on the trust. So this is a very important concept. The other category is section 11.4a, subsection 4a, which say that if you are having anything incidental to your main objects, and then it can be undertaken provided the condition is that there should be separate set of books for that and which need to be audited. Therefore, it is not a prohibition, direct prohibition on trust doing business. So this also one needs to keep in mind. So on a day-to-day basis, the trust having these marriage halls or any other halls, convention halls, for them, the accounting part and the presentation part becomes very or assumes greater importance, because otherwise there is a chance that they will be treated as a business receipt, and then that will obviously be more than your 20% of your collection. So this is as far as the purpose is concerned. Now, next slide. After 1961 Act, trust can either be wholly charitable or wholly religious. There cannot be a mixed object. Provisions means prior to 1961, that means 1922 Act was there perhaps, in that the mixed objectives were permitted. So those 1961, those are permitted to have this kind of mixed objects. So otherwise, after 1961, the charitable purpose, I mean charitable trust cannot have religious activity. In fact, if the charitable trusts are having religious activity and they are having also ATG, the spending on religious activity should not be more than 5% of the total income. So this is another restriction on that. See, for example, typically in a hospital premises or a school premises, there could be a small temple. Now that temple could be a religious activity. There has to be maintained. There has to be some priest employed for puja and everything. So that is permitted. But that religious expenditure on the religious activity cannot exceed 5% of the total income. Otherwise, your ATG is lost. Provisions of section 11 are not applicable for partly charitable and partly religious purpose. So this is the thing which just now I mentioned, that one should be exclusively charitable or exclusively religious. We go to the next slide then. Now, private trust and public trust. What is the real distinction between public trust and private trust? Many people say, we have to form a trust, but we have to give the benefit to the entire society, but it will be a private trust. By that, they have in their mind that the management or the control will be only with the private, that is family persons, but the beneficiaries will be public at large. So technically, these are public trusts. That means what is the governing, or what is the point that really distinguishes from a public trust and private trust is who are the beneficiaries. If the beneficiaries are public at large, then it, or a large section of the society, then it becomes a public trust. But if it is the beneficiaries are restricted to some family members or to a particular employees of a particular company only, then these are restricted beneficiaries are there, and therefore then it is a private trust. So private trust and public trust is distinguished not on the basis of who is managing it. For example, there could be any industrial trust, industrial houses are having their own trust. Now it may be called as Tata Trust, but the Tata Trust perhaps may be for the benefit of the entire community or the entire society. So remember that the distinction is based on who is the beneficiary. If it is beneficiary is public at large, it is a public charitable trust. Otherwise, it is a private trust. Charitable and religious, of course, the same distinction. One may have a private temple in his premises, so that's a private religious trust. We go to the next slide. Now, this general scheme of taxation we will see, but the distinction, having learned what is the distinction, then in the private trust, I will not elaborate much, but the private trust, again, there are two categories. One is private specific trust, which is taxed in a different manner, where the beneficiaries and the shares are determinate. Who is the beneficiary is also known, and how much is share is also known. Whereas a private discretionary trust, which is taxed necessarily at the maximum marginal rate, is where the beneficiaries or shares both are undecided or indeterminate. Means beneficiaries may be fixed, but their shares may be undecided. For example, one may say that I have settled a trust for my grandchildren. My son, my daughter, they are the basically trustees, and then they will decide as to now beneficiaries are defined. My grandchildren are my beneficiaries, but they will decide how much to give to whom. Like they will have their discretion that now in the next generation somebody needs more. So how much share one should get is then left to the discretion of the trustees. Sometimes it could be the other way around. The trustees may be assigned a task to give it to, means any beneficiary that they can select. That means beneficiaries are also indeterminate, and the sharing also is indeterminate. That is called private discretionary trust, which is taxed at the maximum marginal rate. We go to the, because this is just incidental mention, otherwise our topic is the charitable trust taxation. Now this is there one, there is basically this chapter 3A is now basically divided into two categories of trust, two broad categories. One is falling under section 10 and the other one falling under section 11 to 13. Now section 10, very peculiarly, section 1023C is the one which I have come across that many chartered accountants are not using this particular section effectively for their clients. So we will see what this section 1023C is. But section 11, for that there are 2-3 conditions. One is that for section 11, the registration under section 12AA, which is now made to 12AB, is mandatory. So unless you are registered under section 12AB or AA, you are not entitled to any exemption. That is for section 11. For section 10, the registration under section 12AA or 12AB is not really required. But for practical purposes, when you obtain ATG, then they insist that your registration under section 12AA also should be there. So this is, one has to keep in mind that for section 10, registration under section 12AA is not mandatory, whereas for section 11 to 13 registration is compulsory. Then the obligation to spend 85% of the on section 11 trust, there is an obligation to spend. I will deal with it elaborately when I come to the actual provisions of the section, but I am just giving you broad distinction. Whereas section 1023C, in the normal core, there is no such obligation of spending 85%, except there are certain categories under section 1023C where one has to spend this much. And then for the now they have made, the law is getting changed on from 1st of October. Earlier, registration under section 12AA was something like a permanent registration. That means you don't have to renew it. So that means there could be some trust registered in the year 1965, and they are having still same kind of say 12AA registration, same registration is continuing. But now they have made the amendment saying that even this registration also will be renewed every 5 years. So whatever who are the existing registered trusts like under 12AA or 12, they will have to switch over to 12AB. They will have to obtain a fresh registration. Just as earlier there was their service tax and GST. So who are existing that they switched over to the GST. Likewise, here also 12A registered trust will have to obtain registration under section 12AB separately. So this is the law amended on since 1st of October 2020. And then this is so also ATG. ATG also was more or less permanent after the year 2009. So the trust registered are having ATG certificate from as on 1st of October 2009. We are having permanent ATG certificate, but that also is now changed. So your existing ATG certificate also will have to be renewed every 5 years. So this is the main distinction being brought out by the Amendment Act of 2020. Now this is one, means registration. I'll deal with that registration further. But even today, if at all there are, once you are registered under section 12AA, today's position, as I mentioned to you, that it was a permanent registration. But even today, if there is any amendment in your objects clause, then that amendment, then you have to obtain like something like a fresh registration, because the modified objects are also to be now put on the record of the income tax. Remember, for these income tax commissioners who are empowered or rather authorized to grant registration, their focus is on your objects clause. What they try to see is whether your objects are fitting into the definition of charitable purpose. This is the main purpose. Then there are other things also they see. What is the management style, what is the succession, what is the dissolution methodology, all that they see. But their focus is on the objects clause. So if you change the object clause, then it has to be something like a fresh registration. We have to approach them. So this one has to keep in mind that section 10, technically speaking, 12AA is not required, but for section 11, it is a mandatory thing. We go to the next slide. 10 and 11, our distinction is continuing. Now section 10 exemption means it says any income, and the various subsections are particularly section 1023C we will be dealing with. But strictly speaking, registration, just now I covered 12AA is not required. Now, and 85% spending is there only for certain categories of section 10. Go to the next slide. Now, general scheme of taxation. What are the incomes basically? The incomes are voluntary contributions. Now remember, voluntary contributions by definition, by specific clause, have been given the status of an income. Otherwise, had there been voluntary contribution, it was earlier not an income. Those seniors chartered accountants who will remember that then it becomes a sort of a capital receipt, like a gift is a capital receipt. So because of section 56 amendment, now it has become a revenue receipt being taxable. Or rather it is taxable, but it is not a revenue receipt still. It is a capital receipt, but it has been made taxable by the fiction of section 56. So gift has been now made taxable. But this particular argument otherwise would have been advanced for the charitable trust, but that is why they say that voluntary contributions was always a revenue receipt for the charitable trust. So you cannot take a shelter of the fact that it is a voluntary contribution, so it is like a gift and therefore it is a capital receipt. But If it is a corpus donation, then it has a different implication, which I will be explaining. Then property income is usually there. Then there could be business income, which just now I mentioned, section 11.4, where the trust business itself is settled on trust, or 11.4a, which is an incidental business. And the capital gains also there. Capital gains are, there is a peculiar way of taxation of capital gains, which is separately provided for in subsection 1a of section 11. Now, next. So there is a very next slide. There is a very important thinking in that. Next slide, please. Incomes are continued. Government grants is next income. Then income from investments and surplus from activity. Now see, there is no prohibition for having any surplus. You can have a surplus, but your motive should not be making profit. So that is the distinction. There can be a surplus. It is not prohibited. So income from investments also can be there, but you cannot invest in shares. These investments, there is a restriction, that's unless which are specified in section 11 subsection 5, only those categories of investments can be done. And the government grants also, one has to see carefully the terms of the grant, whether it is a capital grant or a revenue grant. But in most of the grants, there is a clause that if you don't utilize this grant within a particular or specified time, then you have to give it back. Then there is a good case to argue that so long as we don't utilize it, it is something like in the nature of a liability, because we are liable to spend it, and therefore there is a good case to argue that it is not forming part of my income. Because for example, if the government give you a grant to be spent for within 2 years, now whatever is the unspent grant at the cutoff date of 31st March, you can always say that yes, this is my liability. So this is just an incidental observation. We go to the next slide. Then we come to the expenditure. Now remember here, there is one important principle for the taxation of charitable trusts. There is a thinking in the government also, and among many professionals also, and which is not a incorrect thinking, which is right thinking, that basically for charitable trusts, the actual receipt and actual spending is more important. It is like, otherwise there are formulae in the act for deciding a particular head of income, the computation of income. But they say no, because what government intends is that whatever you receive, whatever you earn, you must spend something directly on the charitable object, that is 85%. Now take a concrete example, that is of say income from house property. Now income from house property, ordinarily you get a 30% standard deduction. Now the doubts are expressed whether that deduction is available, because that deduction is without any spending. So what they say is, it is like a receipt and payment account, and not like the computation formula, nor it is like our the notional or income notional deductions. So this is a distinction, and there sometimes the decisions are based on this principle. Therefore, whether a mercantile basis will be available, for example, if you provide the liability, whether it can be treated as an expenditure for the application of income, these are all fine distinctions or fine debates that arise in the taxation of charitable trusts. But let me now come to the expenditure. So they say that actual spending is required. It is not that merely you provide for something. Now there are, in expenditure, there are three categories. What are those three categories? One is the expenditure for earning the income. Now remember, for example, if you have a charity show, then the charity show means the booking of hall, that means hall rent, the artist payment, all these other tickets and other incidental expenses, overheads will be, they are spending for earning the income. So charitable show. Or there could be, for example, you print a souvenir. Now if you print the souvenir, then also for getting advertisements and other things, then you spend on the printing of the souvenir. So these are the items, or you may pay commission for those who bring advertisement. Now this is called expenditure for earning the income. If the expenditure is for earning the income, then it has to be directly netted out. Means it is not obviously on the objects of the trust. So this is first distinction one has to keep in mind. So charity show, the surplus means that spending which is for earning the income will not qualify for your 85% of the application. So this is important. The next is administrative expenses. Now administrative expenses or establishment, for example, school. Now school, there could be normal staff will be there, office overheads will be there, their telephone, conveyance, all administrative expenses will be falling under administrative expenses. But teacher salaries will be on the objects of the trust. Earlier, income tax was trying to distinguish between these, and they were saying that these administrative expenses will not be eligible for your expenditure on objects, that is 85%. But then the many court decisions, courts have decided that unless there is an establishment, you cannot carry out an expenditure or carry out the objects. And therefore now the last two categories are now both together are treated as expenditure on object of the trust. But otherwise, the many people think that first establishment to expenses will be deducted on the balance 85%. Then that because of that, if you work out the arithmetic, then probably your requirement for spending will become higher. So now expenditure on objects. Expenditure on objects, there could be some peculiar items are there, like depreciation. Now depreciation, there is a peculiar provision. Remember here that in the application that 85%, even capital expenditure also qualifies for that. So even the so now for computation of income of a charitable trust, one has to see not only the income and expenditure account, but also the balance sheet, because if there are any additions to the asset, that also qualifies as if it is an application of income. But earlier there were two Bombay High Court decisions which were very peculiar, and they said that if you have spent it as a capital expenditure, then that is eligible as an application, and over and above that, every year you will also get depreciation. Remember that once you treat it as an application, in the accounts it is not written off. Just as, for example, section 35, there are expenditure where 100% deduction was allowed. For example, for scientific research instruments, or there are certain categories where 100% was there, like life-saving drugs, life-saving equipments. Now that does not mean that the asset is to be written off in the accounts. The accounts will continue to show it as an asset. So the Bombay High Court said that over and above the capital expenditure in the year of spending, first year, over and above that, you will every year also get depreciation. But now that amendment has plugged that particular loophole. About 2 years, I think 2015 or 16, it was plugged. And now they say, if you have claimed it as a full, I'm not saying write-off, but you have claimed as an application of income in the year of acquisition, then again you will not get depreciation. Now that means one has to keep track. One has to keep track as to on what asset we have claimed as full application and what asset is not claimed as full application. And we have to not only keep a track, but you should be able to show and prove that we have not claimed. So this is another important task for a tax consultant and auditor. It is always better that in the balance sheet or somewhere in the notes, you make this distinction every year so that the track is kept. So this is very important as far as the accounting and the audit and the taxation part is concerned, because now one has to be careful in not making a double claim. Even a repayment of loan is also falling under the category of the expenditure on the object of the trust. So this is also very interesting. So suppose you have borrowed money for building some certain things, and then if you are prepaying that loan, then that also will be falling under the same category as expenditure on the object of the trust. Even your tax payment also could be treated as expenditure on the object of the trust. TDS was held to be expenditure on the object of the trust. Then there is another very debatable point in that, but now it is settled more or less by the Supreme Court. The C category I am saying, deficit or set off, whether it can be carried forward and set off in the next year. Now that also, fortunately, Supreme Court has held that yes, you can carry forward your losses, you can carry forward your deficit and claim it in the subsequent years. But of course, the computation one has to be very careful, and there is a peculiar methodology by which you have to keep on presenting it. Donation to other trusts, this is also important. Donation to other trusts is also falling as a category which is eligible as expenditure on object of the trust, but there is one peculiarity in this. If you accumulate it, if you accumulate the income, and that accumulation is under section 11.2, which I will be dealing with shortly, but if you accumulate the income, then out of the accumulated income, you cannot give said donation to other trust. Then it is not eligible. Right? Please try to understand. Out of my current income, I can give the donation to the other trust with the similar objects. Of course, it has to be similar objects, otherwise it will be a contravention of my object clause. So it has to be of similar object. But if I give out of my current income, yes, it is an application of income. But if I accumulate it, and why they have made this particular loophole? Because then there were many trusts who were the rotating amounts among themselves. Like if you accumulate over 5 years, then in the 4th or 5th year, they used to pass on it to other trusts. Then again, that other trust also in the 5th year, they used to pass on to the 3rd trust. Likewise, they were simply rotating among the trusts and it was not spent at all. So government is keen that there should be no accumulation or amassing of wealth in the trust, charitable trust, and it should be really spent for the objects of the trust. So government's keenness is on that, and therefore this distinction we have to keep in mind, that donation to the other trust, if it is out of current income, it is permitted, but if it is out of accumulated income, it is not permitted. Next, another thing, if you give donation, which was pertaining to the previous slide, but let me mention here that if you give donation to the other trust for corpus, then it will not be treated as an application for the donor trust. So this is another thing, because otherwise what used to happen, that the recipient trust was treating it as corpus trust, corpus donation and not taxable, whereas the donor trust was getting it as a deduction. So this was the loophole which was there, which they tried to plug. Now we'll come to this general scheme of taxation which is continuing. So section 1023C, there are two broad categories of this section 1023C. The trusts which are exclusively educational means nothing else but education, like only schools, colleges, or whatever is related to the education. And then exclusively health, that is medical. Of course, there are twin subjects are there, like for example, a educational institution for medical institution has to have a medical hospital, because otherwise how will the students learn? So it's a different category, but basically it's an educational trust which should be exclusively education and exclusively medical. If these two categories are there, then there is a special exemption under section 1023C. Now what is that exemption? 1023C 3AB and 3AC, which are, I repeat, educational institution and medical institution or hospital. What is 3AB subclause, which say that if you are wholly existing for education exclusively, and if you are wholly or substantially financed by the government, then the entire income is exempt. Now, what do you mean by finance by the government? It could be a state government or a central government, or many institutions receive grants from the corporation or from the state government. So this is being wholly or substantially financed. And what is substantially financed? The definition is that out of your total receipts, if more than 50% are from the government, then you fall in this category. So for example, if your total collection is say 4 crores, out of which 2 crore 20 lakhs you receive as something like a grant, then your entire income is exempt. This is the implication of this 1023AB. Same way, 23AC is in the field of medical institution. So this is the first category, means you are exclusively educational or exclusively medical, and you are wholly or substantially financed by the government. Now we go to the next category. Next slide. Next slide is 3AC. Of course, one part of the previous slide I just cover, because I don't know why it is not reflected here. But 23C, next category of same trust, exclusively educational or exclusively medical, is that if you are, just come to the previous slide, please. Here, this 3AB and 3CAC are dealing with you are wholly or substantially financed. But the other category, that means 1023AD and 1023AE correspondingly, just as here are AB and AC, there is AE, AD and AE, which are again that if you are exclusively educational and medical, but you are not substantially financed by the government, but still if your total collection is less than 1 crore, now taken for example, your total collection of a say school in some village place is 90 lakhs or 80 lakhs, and then it is not financed by the government substantially, only 10 lakhs grant it is receiving. So this is also totally exempt. So here, what is the distinction between this first category which is appearing in the screen and the one which I am describing is that you are not substantially financed or wholly financed by the government, but your total collection is less than 1 crore. Then also you fall in the same category as if you're total exempt. So this is that subcategory which I mentioned, 3AD and 3E. Now we go to the next slide. Now this is spending of 85%. Now these 20 saying section 1023C, there is a last category of exclusively educational and exclusively medical where you are neither substantially financed by the government nor your total collection is less than 1 crore. So take for example, there is a trust which is total collection is 2 crores and it is not substantially financed by the government, but still you are totally educational or exclusively educational. Then what they can do? Then they have to obtain an approval from the CBDT for the exemption under section 1023C. But unfortunately, all other restrictions of section 11 to 13 then become applicable to this kind of trust. Therefore, then there is not much fun, not much advantage in claiming 1023C for this last category. What is the last category? I reiterate. The last category is that your total collection is more than 1 crore, and though you are exclusively educational, you are not financed by the government. So or substantially financed by the government. Otherwise, there is a restriction or there is a binding that you must spend 85% of your collection or 85% of your income. Now they loosely use the word as income, and then we know that the word income is subject to so much of debate or to what exactly you mean by income, then whether it is on accrual basis, whether it is on cash basis. But the government's thinking is that it should be on the cash basis. This is the thinking of the government. Rather general, many professionals also hold that view that it should be actual receipt, because unless it is received, how can I spend? So it has to be received, and then once it is received, it has to be actually spent. So it is not merely a provision or a mercantile method may not be applicable, is what some people express their doubt. Now we go to the next category. Next slide. Sitting aside, now we are now properly on section 11, scheme of section 11 to 13. Now that means, remember, now we are not dealing with the one which is exclusively educational or exclusively medical. The one which is exclusively educational and exclusively medical is in section 10. Now we are having general objects which are neither exclusively educational nor exclusively medical. So there could be many, or generally whatever we have trust before us, before our eyes, is normally the third, this category, which is of general. So now in that, what is the, for example, yoga, or for example, this conservation of environment, conservation of monuments, all these other or general public utility, all those other categories, now I will be discussing that particular taxation of those trusts. There, if 85% of the income is spent on the objects of the trust, and by the objects of the trust I mean the establishment expenses as well as the actual objects of the trust, then the remaining 15% is exempt. In short, 15% is something like a standard deduction. But remember that it is not that you get 15% and then, if suppose you have spent 90%, your total collection is 1 crore, you have spent 90 lakhs, for example, then remaining 10 lakhs is exempt. That means that remaining portion cannot exceed 15%. Otherwise, there are different provisions. So that means you cannot say that 5 lakhs is my deficit. Please try to understand that it is not 15% standard deduction from 1 crore, it goes 15%. So I was required to spend 85%, but I spent 90 lakhs. So it does not mean that 5 lakhs is your deficit. So this also one has to keep in mind very carefully. So that remainder, that is the surplus, cannot exceed 15% is the crux of this particular section. So, and that in that 85%, even capital expenditure is also allowed. Go to the next slide. Ah. Now we are on the application of income. That means that 85%, which just now I mentioned, and 85% means another very common question that arises or that is asked, whether a trustee can be paid remuneration. Maybe in some other slide it is there, but since it is a very commonly asked question, yes, there is no bar. There is no bar in paying remuneration to the trustees, because ultimately for running the trust, if at all, what is contemplated or what is provided in the act is that there should not be a benefit to the interested person. And the benefit word is also defined in the sense it is that meaning is provided in the judicial decisions. Benefit means something over and above the normal if you receive. Now take for example, if if there is a college and one of the professors is a trustee, he is a trustee also, but he is getting same remuneration as any other professor is getting, then there is no special benefit that he is getting, then it is permitted. Or just as we have section 48(2)(b in the Income Tax Act, that it has to be reasonable, it has to be, it should not be to a relative, all those things 48(2)(b, those principles will apply here more or less. Another example could be, there could be a medical trust, and in that medical trust, suppose one of the trustees himself is a surgeon. Now for any particular type of surgery, you are paying to an outsider a particular honorarium. Then same honorarium if he is getting, then he is not getting any benefit as such. So therefore, trustees can be paid remuneration. In fact, in the prescribed format of the charitable trust under the Public Trust Act, there's specific item under the expenditure side, whether any remuneration is paid to the trustee. The trustee's remuneration is an item which is in the prescribed format itself. So there is no bar in paying remuneration to the trustees. Now the second point here is that clause 2. Now we will come to see 85% is to be spent. What happens if 85% is not spent? If 85% is not spent, then you have two options. So take an example that your total collection is 1 crore. You were supposed to spend 85 lakhs, but you have spent say only 70 lakhs. So 15 lakhs is the shortfall. Now 15 lakhs is the shortfall. You have two options now. What are those two options? One is that you write in a prescribed form to the government or to the income tax department saying that I have not been able to spend 85% this year because of certain reasons. The reason could be that you received the income too late. For example, you received some income in March itself. So there was no opportunity for you to spend in that year. Or there could be any such reason. There could be some natural calamity. There should be some any other reasonable cause which prevented you from spending. If that is like lockdown, for example, if that is there, then you have to simply submit a form 9A along with the return before the due date of filing the return and say that I will make up this deficit in the next year. So next year, suppose my total collection is 2 crores. In that I was supposed to spend 1 crore 70 lakhs, but I spent only 1 crore 50 lakhs in the next year. Then this first 15 lakhs which were deficit in the earlier year, deficit in what sense? Deficit in the spending, the shortfall in the spending. So first 15 lakhs will be attributable to the previous year or the preceding year. That means next year, how much it will be treated as I have spent only 1.35 because actually I have spent 1.50. But that 15 lakhs was my obligation to spend for the previous year. Therefore, my spending for the second year is becoming 1.30. It is a common sense thing. So let me not elaborate it to the chartered accountants as such. So this is one option, that is form submission of form number 9A and get in an option under explanation to the section 11(1)(a). That means we call it loosely as grace period. So in the grace period of 1 year, you are spending it. So that is okay. Now we go to the next slide. The second category means first is second option, because application, as I told you, that 85% if there is a shortfall, what happens? If there is a shortfall, then first option just now explained, first alternative, that you say that next year I will spend. But if you don't want to spend in the next year, and if you want to accumulate it for some specific purpose, like say acquiring an asset, normally that specific purpose accumulation is normally for a capital asset. For example, you have to construct a building, or if you want to acquire some big, high priced equipment. Now, this is some capital expenditure or major renovation you have to carry out. All these things are then require what is called as accumulation. That is section 11.2. So there is a simple form called form number 10, which you submit along with the return or before the due date of filing the return, with a resolution that the trustees have decided to accumulate the income, and therefore whatever is the shortfall will be spent within 5 years from the year of accumulation. Taken for example, March 31st March 1920, that means 1920, you were supposed to spend, as I had mentioned here, 85 lakhs, but you spent only 60 lakhs. Remaining 25 lakhs, you can say that I am accumulating and I will be spending within next 5 years. Next, similarly, in 2020-21, that means March 21, also similar thing happens. Now, from every year, respective 5 years you will get. For example, whatever I accumulated for March 20, I have to spend before March 25. Whatever I accumulate for March 21, I have to spend before 31st March 26. Likewise, so that 5 years are counted from every year end. So this is very important provision, so that you can also, it is not necessary that you spend everything in 1/5 year. You can always make it a phased manner. If your building construction is going on, or if your asset acquisition is going on, then you can spread it out, spread it over 5 years. So this is called accumulation. Then about 10-15 minutes ago I referred to as, once it is accumulated, then it cannot be given away to the other trust. Here you will understand the meaning here, because here now you are accumulating it for a particular purpose. But it may happen, I remember in both these categories, one important point, fortunately, is that this is only an intimation to the income tax department. No approval or permission is required. So it is your own unfettered right that you exercise an option of spending in the next year, or you exercise the option of accumulation. This, no permission is required. But remember that once you accumulate, and if you write a particular purpose, but afterwards you may change the purpose. So that also you have to simply intimate. So there is no permission required. Take an example that a particular social organization wants to buy an ambulance. Therefore, they are accumulating their income. But in the third year, for example, somebody donates them the vehicle or the ambulance. Then there is no purpose for them to acquire the ambulance or spend on the ambulance. Then they can change over the object. And so this is also only an intimation. This is not a permission required. But within 5 years, they have to spend. This is most important part. So separate reserve is also not required to be created. Like whatever you accumulate on the balance sheet side, you need not show any separate reserve as such. Just as there were provisions under section 32AB or of the Income Tax Act, where the corresponding commitment you have to show it as a reserve is not required. Next, go to the next slide. I hope up till now everything is clear, but if at all there is any specific query, and if you want me to clarify that, I think we can have about 2-3 minutes if there is some small query, so that I also get relief in the talking, if there is any query. Otherwise, we will go ahead. Shall I proceed?
Yes, sir.
I hope all are awake also.
Sir, we are very much awake.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes,
Good,
sir.
good, good.
Yes, sir. You continue, sir.
Yeah. So now we got one very important factor now one has to keep in mind for charitable trust is that practically all the compliances, all means each and every compliance has to be within the prescribed time limit. If any of it you miss on, you lose the exemption. And what are the normal compliances? Firstly, submission of return, that 30th September or whatever is the extended date, even 1 day's delay will disentitle you from exemption. So this is very, very, very important. One has to be very careful on that, because many chartered accountants are facing embarrassment because their clients are losing the exemption, and the clients are lethargic. The clients are not taking proactive steps. They are not organized, they are not disciplined, but then it should not be aggravated by the ignorance of the chartered accountant. So chartered accountant should, and I would appeal to you, I would request you specifically that make this point very clear in writing to all your trust clients, that if you don't approach us in time, we are not responsible for any loss that you may occur, because otherwise it is very embarrassing. Immediately they may go to the institute for the disciplinary action. So please remember that charitable trust, the matter has become very sensitive and delicate. So go out of the way to submit all their forms in time. So this is my very sincere request and appeal to all chartered accountants for their own benefit and safety. So for example, filing of return or filing of form 9A, that means we'll spend in the next year, that grace period, that also has to be in time. Or filing of form 10. Form 10 means accumulation of 5 years. That also has to be in time. In time in March, what? The due date of filing of return. Then form number 10B, the audit report. Because that audit report, if you have spent 85% or not, or how much you have accumulated, all that is to be certified by the auditor. Auditor means it will not be your statutory auditor, it could be any other chartered accountant also. So that form, that means 10B. In short, each and every form that is required to be submitted has to be in time, otherwise there will be very serious or disastrous consequences, which you please keep in mind. Carry forward and set off, just now I explained that in these two decisions, you will have a very beneficial decision, that even carry forward is permitted. In fact, the particular PPT will be shared with all the members, so that I don't have to read out the citation. Go to the next slide. Now this is, so far what we have discussed is the basic scheme of taxation of the charitable trust. And then now whatever are the peculiarities and whatever are the specific points, that also we'll be discussing. There are recent amendments, and those amendments are, I think they are covered in some of the later slide, but 115 TD. Now if for any reason, if you lose your 12 AA, because you are violating some of the provisions of your trust deed, or if you are violating some of the provisions of the act, you are not actually working as per your trust deed, you are not following the or rather pursuing your objects carefully, or you are doing something which is not like anything because of which you lose your 12 AA, then friends, the consequences are very disastrous. That means you lose exemption ab initio. And what is the consequence? That whatever is the market value of your assets as on today, minus your liabilities, the difference will be taxable as income in the year in which you lose your 12 AA. Imagine, because these assets we have obviously have acquired out of the exempt income, or I mean for any other reason, that where you have received, you have been granted the exemption, it could be a corpus donation or anything. So calculate the market value of your assets today, deduct the liabilities, and the difference will be taxed at the maximum marginal rate. So this is a very disastrous consequence. One should be very careful that section 12 AA is not violated. That means section 12 AA registration is lost. But remember, withdrawal of 12 AA is different and denial of 12 AA is different. So for example, just because you are denied 12 AA, then that does not mean that this provision will apply. You apply for 12 AA, and remember now at this juncture, I appeal to you again very sincerely, very, very earnestly, that the first and foremost thing one should always do whenever you come across any assignment of charitable trust is to ensure that 12 AA is given, applied for. 12 AA has a very, 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 very fundamental requirement. Without that, everything is futile. So 12 AA, if it has not been done last so many years, sit on the head of the trustees and make them apply for 12 AA. This is most important compliance. And now remember, that in the year of application, usually they grant from the 1st April of that particular year. Suppose I apply for today for a charitable trust, my registration will be from 1st of April 2020. But that means nobody has the power to condone the delay. This is most important part. Nobody has the power to condone the delay. But fortunately, there is a good provision they have brought. This new government brought when they came to power in the year 2014, that if at all, now listen to this very carefully, if at all you apply today and you get 12 AA, then, and your objects all for last 5 years also same. That means had you applied 5 years ago, you could have got it. Then, remember, then the previous assessments will not be disturbed or reopened merely on the ground that 12 AA was not there. This is a very welcome provision. This is a very beneficial provision. Indirectly, you get the benefit retrospectively. You get the benefit. There is a proviso now they have added to section 11, so that if you will get as if you were registered. I think that proviso is to 12 AA, so that no pre-existing assessment or previous assessment will be disturbed if you finally get the 12 AA even in subsequent years. So this is a very, very welcome provision which one has to keep in mind. We go to the next slide. That is okay. That's now I decided. This is discussed. Next slide. Next slide. This audit report 10B, 10BB. Now, what is the 10B and 10BB? 10B is normally, or this 85% of the spending, auditor has to certify that the trust has spent something, and the accumulation is also deemed to be an application. So, for example, in that example of 1 crore collection and 85% lakh was spending required, suppose the trust spends only 60 lakhs and 25 it accumulates, then that accumulation is also falling in the category of application. So the auditor is required to see that. But we have to be extremely careful in this, because in 10B there are certain clauses where whether there is any spending or any benefit given to the specified persons, and who are the specified person, nobody really knows. Even the trustees may not be knowing, because these specified persons are having very peculiar definition. Any person who has so far in the lifetime given more than 50,000 donation to the trust also becomes a specified specified person. It is very dangerous. So again I request you that in your MRL, management representation letter, do insist on their declaration as to who is the specified person, because many chartered accountants are not even aware of this provision. Section 13 says that if you have spent anything on the specified person, that means the trustee's relative, settler, if there is something direct spending for that, then your exemption may be lost to some extent. So remember, this is a very important thing as an audit, because 10B is nothing but an audit report that we are giving, that we have verified the spending. So please be very careful for taking the declaration in the MRL that who is the specified person. And for this form 10 and all, you actually verify whether it has been submitted. Suppose it has been submitted late, then also there is a problem. So as an auditor, you have to be very careful. Then the 10BB and the 10, what is 10BB? Those categories where it is more than 1 crore and it is not substantially financed by the government, then you have to obtain specific approval from the CBDT. For them, the form audit report is 10BB. So 10BB, and then this is to be submitted within the time prescribed for the filing of income tax return. And for this, we have our institute's guidance note also on charitable trust, and AS12 also is there to govern the taxation of the grants. We go to the next slide. Audit report, same thing, just now I discussed. So we'll go further up. Audit report 10B, what is there? This is, if at all there is a delay, there could be a penalty, penal consequences. 143.3 assessment means this. If it is a scrutiny assessment also, it will be affected by this if 10B is not there. And ICAI issued a guidance note for audit of public trust. So this is just for your information. Next. TDS. Now TDS provisions also, all TDS provisions are applicable to the trust. But as far as trust income is concerned, also merely because you are a trust, you are not exempted. So, but you have to specifically obtain lower tax rate deduction certificate, and it is a Herculean task. It is no lot of expenditure. Sometimes it is wiser and prudent to allow the TDS to be done and claim it as a refund. That is sometimes much practical and wiser thing. But you can otherwise obtain a certificate that your tax should not be deducted. And for that now there is a prescribed form, prescribed section is also there. They claim that it will be issued online, but you know how the government or the income tax department functions. So it is a Herculean task. Only if the figures are warranting, figures are worthwhile and material, only then you go in for that. Otherwise, let the tax be deducted and you claim it as exempt. That is simpler. But you are yourself not exempted from deducting tax of others. So for that, now, now one more important amendment at this juncture, let me mention that just as for business income, you have this 43B, 40A3 cash expenditure or 40A1A or 40A1B. That means rather 40A1A, normally we have that. That means non-deduction of tax at source or and spending in cash. All these expenditure earlier they were not affecting the trust, but now they have made an amendment saying that in the business income whatever are the provisions there of disallowance, same thing will be applicable here, although you are not having business income. See, they have not said that section 40A3 vagara will apply. That's the substance of section 40A3, substance of section 40A1A, that they have incorporated in this. So remember that if you have the trust has not deducted tax at source of a particular payment or not done the compliances on that, then to that extent the expenditure will be ignored for that application of 85%. For example, if you have spent 70 lakhs, but on 5 lakhs you are supposed to deduct tax at source, which you have not done. Now in the normal course, in 40A1A, what would have been the disallowance? 30% will be the disallowance. So to that extent, your spending will be treated as less. So this is the thing, as if your 40A1A was applicable to you. Similarly, cash payment. So if you have made a cash payment for acquiring asset, etc., then also the spirit of 40A3 will be applicable. That means the cash payment thing. So this also now they have incorporated. Tax deduction at source, just now I explained that it applies to the trust with equal force, just as it applies to any other entity. So trusts are basically not exempted. Next, ATG. For ATG, there is a prescribed form for ATG. Now, usually under the Act, it is said that the time limit for issuing 12AA and ATG is within 6 months from the date of end of the month in which the application is made. But all as usual, the department wakes up only in the 5th or 6th month and they make you run and to get that certificate. Otherwise, they have to pass an order of denial. But there are good decisions now to say that if they fail to do the order within 6 months, then it will be deemed to be allowed. But in ATG, one has to keep in mind that if there is one single donation of 2000, more than 2000 in cash, then the donor will not be allowed ATG. So it will be worthwhile for the trust, whosoever is the clerk or whosoever the trustee, whosoever the volunteer who is collecting donation from others, and if the donor is intending to get ATG, then you have to caution him that if it is more than 2000, it has to be by cross check. It cannot be in cash. And one time I am saying, so we know our chartered accountants are very smart. So suppose somebody gives to 10,000, you can always split it on 5 days. That's a different story. Just as we do it for 40A3. But remember that you have to use your discretion in such adjustments, and therefore one time if you, but it's, for example, if one I visit a particular philanthropic institution today and I give them 2000, after about 2-3 months again I happen to visit there and I give 2000, you know, that kind of genuine thing is permitted up to, it is not total cumulative during the year. It is one time, a single occasion. If you are paying more than 2000, then it has to be by check. So remember that this particular provision, trust has to be careful, because otherwise the donors will start shouting. So, you know, you have to also guide the trustees for the general management and administration of the trust as such. In fact, ideally, on the receipt book also, you make the client print this particular remark so that the donors do not get irritated. They do not get angry that the trust did not guide them. So it is your duty as a professional to set up a good system there in the trust and advise them that they should advise the donor that the trust should receive donation only by check if it is more than 2000. That is one. Now, in ATG now they have brought another amendment this year. Just as we have 26 A's for this TDS, now for ATG also, what they have introduced is that the trust every year shall upload the list of donors with their PAN and other things. So this is a very peculiar thing that they have done, so that if donor claims any deduction, then they will link it with the return filed by the trust, and they will, just as they do for 26 A's TDS. So this is another very peculiar thing, and it may cause very lot of inconvenience because the trusts are not organized, trusts are not disciplined. So many trusts may fail to do so, and if the trusts are failing to do so, then probably the SSCs may. So it may happen, but please advise your trust clients that they should be geared up to do these compliances. Business 11.4 and 11.4 I have already explained. So let us go ahead. Institutional income business would be eligible for exemption. This also we have discussed, because the business should be incidental to the main trust, and separate books are maintained. So these are the two conditions. Even if you are having business income, you are still entitled to the exemption. Next slide. Now what are the other conditions for the exemption? Section 11.5 says that you have to make investment only in the prescribed categories. But this is as far as income tax is concerned. But charity commissioner also has his own guidelines, and which are issued by the Law and Judiciary Department. So you have to follow both 11.5 of the Income Tax Act as well as the guidelines issued by the Charitable Trust Authority, that means Charity Commissioner. And normally normally the mutual funds and other things which are eligible for this, they have to specifically obtain such approval from the government, and then they advertise in the prospectus that our securities or our mutual funds are trust securities. That means trusts are eligible to invest in that. See, all mutual funds, all the things are not eligible for this type of 11.5 investment. But if the government has approved that particular, for example, Unit Trust of India, certain schemes were there which were approved as trust securities. That means the trusts are permitted to invest in that, but that is mentioned in the prospectus. Then section 13 is withdrawal of exemption, that I mentioned to you. If you have spent on specified persons, or if you have violated section 11.5, or if you have lost section 12AA, all those things will be a consequence, and section 13 talks of withdrawal of exemption. And the specified persons, as I mentioned to you, I have explained what is benefit, who is the beneficiary, all this also I explained already. So now we go ahead. Anonymous donation. This is another very important part. You see, if you are, this was basically to plug the loophole of huge cash donations taken as the capitation fees taken by the engineering colleges or medical colleges at the time of admission. So now what they have done is, if you are having your anonymous donation, what is anonymous? Where you cannot produce details of the donor, name, address, permanent account number, his sources. If you are not able to prove, then you can have at the most 5% of your total collection under the category of anonymous. Now I will give you a very interesting story about this, because once it is an anonymous donation, and moreover, remember, this does not apply to a religious trust. So it is a temple, for example. Otherwise, normal provisions of 12A, then normal provisions of 11, etc. are applicable to the religious trusts also. But religious trusts never get ATG. Now I will come to that, how they will get ATG, I will come to that. But let me explain to you this very interesting story and example, which is a live example. Now, there was a very well-known deity temple in Nasik. Very well-known, very famous, maybe a tradition of a few hundred years. And unfortunately, what had happened was that obviously, since it was religious, it was not having ATG. But The anonymous donations, I am on this point, anonymous donations are taxable at the straight away at the maximum marginal rate. So if you are having anonymous donations more than 5, you are a charitable trust, for example. If you are a charity, not religious, there is a distinction between charitable and religious. If you are religious trust, no problem. You can take as much cash in the sense anonymous donations as you like. But if you are, and people took advantage of this in the demonetization, because then they said all those old notes were then in the operatory box. दानपात्रात टाकलेल्या ते सगळ्या डोनेशन आहेत असं they argued. So here I am on the point that if it is anonymous donation, then and if it is more than 5%, so if suppose your total collection is 1 crore of the donation and your anonymous donations are 10 lakhs, first 5 lakhs will be exempt, but excess 5 lakhs will be taxed at the maximum marginal rate. So this is important. Now, in that particular temple, what happened was there was one very enthusiastic trustee who was appointed, and he went to the income tax department and he changed the category under section 12A certificate. He changed it from religious to charitable, and then he obtained ATG. And then in the next day there was a big headline in all newspapers that such an old temple which was not otherwise having ATG certificate, now falana trustees have obtained it, and therefore there was a big celebration. But then घी देखा मगर बड़गा नहीं देखा ऐसा हुआ, because what happened that then the temple had a collection in the operatory box of 4 crores of rupees every year average. Now that 4 crore rupees becomes taxable. Once you are not religious and you are charitable, then it becomes taxable. So that means he did not understand what he was doing in the enthusiasm. So please remember this, that your anonymous donations, the prescribed details otherwise have to be there for each and every donation. If it is anonymous and if it is more than 5% of your total donations, then it is that excess is taxable at the maximum marginal rate. There is also a limit of 1 lakh, basic limit. So 1 lakh or 5%, whichever is higher. For example, if your 5% works out to only 80,000, for example, your total collect donation is 4 lakhs, 5% or 40 lakhs, and 5% works out to 80,000. Still, you get exemption of 1 lakh. So 1 lakh or 5%, whichever is higher, is the exemption, which is not taxed at the maximum marginal rate. So this anonymous donation also one has to keep in mind. If it is a mixed religious and charitable both activities. Now the question was what really they do for getting ATG for the religious trust or a temple, famous temple like Tirupati Samsthan or Sai Baba Samsthan or Siddhi Vinayak. What they do is that they form the satellite organizations which are exclusively for education or medical. So you may have, for example, Tirupati Devasthan College or Tirupati Devasthan Hospital, but it is not the same temple trust. The temple trust is a controlling interest in those educational institutions which are separate entities. Those are educational, those are not religious. Although the name may say that Sai Baba College or Sai Baba Samsthan Medical Hospital, but those are otherwise different trusts that you have to remember. So suppose any temple trust approaches you for ATG, you have to point blank tell them that trust, religious trust, you will not get ATG, but otherwise you have to form a separate trust for, and the constitution of that trust, composition of the trustees could be controlled by you, so that you have an indirect control over them, but it has to be a separate trust, separate entity, separate object clause. So this is a way, it is not a loophole or way out, it is a genuine thing. So one should be careful in advising such things. Next, anonymous donation, just now I explained, whatever was explained is here, that person receiving such donation has to identify from whom he has received and such other details or such other record one has to keep. So that is, in short, you have to identify. Just as we have to prove the loans, you have to prove the gifts in the normal assessment, same way you have to prove give the records of the donors. If it is cash, particularly if cash, if it is by check, usually nobody will question, usually. But still, it doesn't mean that if it is by check, you are not answerable. One has to keep a record. Next. This just now I mentioned to you, special rate, maximum marginal rate is, it is taxed. Whatever is by this donation, Now, one important thing which I have yet to deal with is the corpus. This is now clear. I have covered this. 1 lakh rupees, you see 5% of the total donation and 1 lakh. I have already covered it in my previous slide. So you can go to the next slide. Anonymous donation. I think most of this I have already discussed. Any trust? Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. So one important point which I missed out in my earlier discussion is the computation methodology or the general scheme of taxation is that in the receipts there could be corpus donations. Now what is a corpus donation? Corpus, the dictionary meaning of the word corpus is the body. Your body is the corpus. Now that corpus donation means which is given of a capital nature usually. It says that or for a specific purpose with a specific direction in writing by the donor, then it is called corpus donation. I think this slide also you can go ahead because now all this I have covered already. So this important. Now I am explaining to you the implication of corpus donation. Now corpus donation means it has to be in the writing given by the donor. Many trusts are loosely doing what? They say that above a particular amount we will treat it as corpus. It is not so. It is not your discretion. There has to be a letter from the donor. There could be a standard stereotype letter. There is no bar. It is not that the donor, every donor has to write separately. You can prepare it yourself. You can give them a format and there the donor just signs. He says that the donation which I am giving is only for the particular purpose. For example, building donation or building fund. So which is to be utilized only for construction of building, or he may say that it is only to be used, only the interest will be used for a particular your objects. For example, it could be prizes, or it could be some scholarships, or it could be some medical aid or treatment for a particular type of. For example, one may give a donation to a hospital saying that the interest will be utilized only for the treatment of cancer patients. So for example like this. So the basic corpus donation is toward the capital, and it is not falling in that category of 85% spending. So for example, if a trust receives total donation of 1 crore 20 lakhs, out of which 20 lakhs is the corpus donation of this category, in the sense that it is with corpus direction. Remember, this is very important. I am repeatedly saying, because many people they say हमारा receipt book है उसमें भी लिखा है corpus. It is not sufficient. It should be the direction from the donor. Or your own resolution also is not sufficient, or your constitution saying that all the donations will be corpus is also not sufficient. I am repeatedly saying this, that it has to be a direction from the donor and donor alone. Your own discretion will not do. Remember, in fact, there are decisions which are normal, our accounting principles. For example, in our normal accounting, what we do is life membership fee we treat as corpus. Life membership fee we treat as capital receipt, and only current yearly membership fee we take as revenue. But in the income tax act, there is no such distinction. Therefore, there were cases, there was litigation that even life membership fee also was sought to be taxed. So remember this, that life membership fee per se is not capital receipt. So one has to be either mention it in the constitution or have a proper resolution. Only then perhaps you have a good case to argue. Otherwise, even this life membership fee also, there could be a litigation. Why I am saying this is that it has to be a direction, not your own discretion of the trustees, but it has to be a direction from the donor. It could be a stereotype thing, but it has to be there. Next. These are all circulars which I have quoted, which members can see it with advantage. Important case laws also are there, which will be, I have explained what are the gist of that case law, so there is not much problem in that. I think basic thing I have covered. Now we have time for the queries. If there are any queries, you may ask. Actually, the topic is very wide, and it may take even 1 or 2 hours also, but the basic crux I have explained.
Sir, hello, sir. Sir, like you said, for the corpus donation, we need to get a direction from the donor. Does it apply for the general purpose donation?
No.
For the object of the clause?
Because see, because corpus is tax free, no. That is why it is on a special category. The corpus donation, suppose the normal general donation, you don't have to get any letter because it is taxable. You have to spend 85% of that. So for just now example which I gave, 1 crore 20 lakhs you receive, out of which 20 lakhs is corpus. For that the letters are out of 1 crore is otherwise taxable. So you have to, unless you spend 85%, it is taxable. For that there is no special letter is required.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sir, good afternoon. Shrikant here. Hello, I am audible?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, sir, good afternoon. Shrikant Limai here.
You can go.
As usual, your speech is really educative and excellent. I have 3 doubts. Out of that, first is, can any trust be a trustee in another trust?
No, no, because it has to be a natural person.
Okay.
Trustee is just a director. You can a company cannot be a director. It has to be a natural person. You can
Okay.
have the right to nominate this thing, but you cannot be a trustee per se.
Oh, okay. My second question is that right now we are speaking about the corpus donation and other donation. So is it necessary to issue the separate receipts for the corpus donation, or the general receipt to be used with a specific direction or mentioning that purpose of the corpus?
No, you can have general the receipt also, but it is for your convenience. In accounting, what happens is if you miss out that all the receipts you account for just as a, without referring to the corpus category, then probably you are in inconvenience. So therefore, for your own understanding, otherwise the receipt will be counted. And in fact,
Okay.
it happened like this. And then they were not even aware of the implication of corpus donation. So although they had received corpus donation, it was just mixed up with the general donation, and therefore they suffered taxes. So then I made them investigate, and then it was found that many of them were corpus donations, so then they were saved. So it is for your own convenience that you should have separate.
Sir, my third doubt is very basic, but that needs to be addressed because lot of confusion when we are saying that particular trust is a religious or the charitable. So how to classify that depends upon the nature of income or the object of the trust for utilizing that funds.
Yes, object. You say that there is some deity or it is for the promotion of Hindu religion or Muslim religion, then it is a religious trust. But or particular temple trust. These are all these are religious trusts. And in the charity commissioner's registration also they mention that it is a religious trust. So because your first registration will be with the charity commissioner, then you come here. So if it is a religious trust, then your object should be mentioned like that.
No, but various religious trusts are doing the charitable work as far as the expenses are concerned. Then,
If religious trust means, suppose, see, there is some distinction between a religious trust. If it is for the deity, for the promotion of the religion, then it is a religious trust. But if the religious trust means there are only, for example, it is of a particular religion, but their objects clause may be clear that we are giving, typically they are Jnati Samstha astat na, like
Oh.
Brahmin Samaj or Maratha Mandal or Sonar Samaj or Mali Samaj. Now what they do is, their objects laws are very wide. They say that all categories of people we will be giving them. Although secretly they only prefer their own community only. But it is not a religious trust. Religious trust means concerning something like actual religious activity, म्हणजे पूजा, अर्चा, टेम्पल चालवणं, अशा ज्या असतात त्याला religious trust म्हणतात.
okay, sir, but as you said, various temples are there in Maharashtra. They are having a religious trust, but they are doing the charitable work. So still we are consider them as a religious and.
हो, हो. पण त्याच्यात त्या चॅरिटेबल याच्यात 85% ते एलिजिबल होतं. त्यांचा प्रॉब्लेम किती होतो, द बेनिफिट इज दॅट they get it even the anonymous donations also taxed, which is that benefit, but they don't get ATG. Or if you really want to spend substantial amount for real charitable, then they will have to form a separate trust. Just now I explained that.
Yeah, I got it.
Sir, there are 2 more queries in the chat box. Shall I ask, sir?
Huh? Yeah.
One from Jayesh Tribhuvan. He is asking, in general trust, running education institute, what would be the income considered for 85% application? Is the gross receipt or net profit?
No, gross.
Gross receipts.
Gross receipt, yes.
Okay. And
But-
another is from Vijay Kumar Shinde.
Hmm.
What is the slab rate? Slab rate.
Slab rate is normal individual rate applicable. That is the slab rate. In fact, there is a peculiar decision of Bombay High Court that a trust to be taxed as an individual. So previously, you remember there was 80L deduction of income. Even that the trust was entitled to. But of course, that is a very unconventional thing. Basically, the slab rates applicable are that for the individual. So, for example, giving a direct example, that suppose your totals after 85% spending and everything, your income, remaining income is say 7 lakhs. And after that, you will get 2.5 lakhs exempt. All those things you will get. That is why what people do is they bring it, they accumulate only to the extent where the remaining income is less than the taxable limit. So only that much application or accumulation they make. But yes, it is applicable to the individual slab rates.
Sir, when 12A registration is not there, then it will be treated as a AOP, Association of Person, for competition purpose.
Yes.
Sir, one more question.
Fortunately, here, see, here, there is one important thing. If it is an AOP, but then the application of income, what the objects of the trust will not be allowed as a deduction. Why? Because it is an application of income. So that means AOP means only what you have spent on for earning, only that will be deducted. So you may indirectly lose the exemption because, for example, if your total collection is 1 crore and you have spent, there is no 12A, you have spent 20 lakhs for earning the income and 60 lakhs for actual objects. Now that 60 lakhs you will not get as a deduction because it is not, it is application of income. By very definition, we treat it as application of income. So then only the whole 80 lakhs may be taxed. So remember, we have to be very careful in that.
Okay.
Sir, one specific query, whether Dealers Association Trust coming under the charitable trust?
See, good. I missed out that point. Actually, you know that 20% thing, which the commercial activity and all, the basic reason for this was that there was Gujarat Maritime Union. What has happened was, see, you know, government observed that these organized like Chamber of Commerce or Merchant Chamber, Indian Merchant Chamber or similar trade associations, they are ostensibly for the promotion of industry or promotion of trade. So they claim it to be because they say that we are not profit earning. We are promoting engineering industry. We are promoting garment industry. In that category, they were claiming it. A similar example, good question was, this is a good question. Even sports club. Now, sports club, they say that you are otherwise lavishly spending there. Like, see, Cricket Club of India or MIG or your Navi Mumbai Sports Club. Now, here people are, they are very extravagant type of things. It is not charity. But their objects will be promotion of sports. But under the promotion of sports, there could be, so government has taken a policy decision not to give ATG or anything for this. I will also deal with the implication of ATG or limitation of ATG. But the question was here, because of that, this particular amendment has come. Because under the guise of this promoting something, you are doing nothing but very extravagant spending. So whatever is their object, if it is actually doing trade, commerce or business, or for the promotion of trade, commerce or business, then it will not be regarded as charitable. That is the amendment they have brought. Even ATG also, I must clarify one point because many members are not aware of this. ATG, if you approach some corporate or you approach some businessman, he under the pretext that you are not having ATG, he avoids giving you advertisement. But many people don't know that advertisement has nothing to do with ATG. Advertisement is a direct 100% allowable expenditure for that person. But many institutions are not aware, and therefore many reputed institutions, they had printed in their advertisement appeal that we have ATG, or I said this is redundant because if you are not having ATG in one particular institution, ATG was not there, but it was a very reputed institution. I said people will unnecessarily deny, and in fact they experience like that. Then you have to educate that donor that there is nothing to do with that. And ATG also, ATG trust as such doesn't benefit much. It is only a USP for them to get donation. And the donor gets very limited amount of tax relief. normally they will not get any major relief because 10% restriction is there on their total income that is eligible for ATG. Most of the things, donors are there who are interested in getting back the cash and some system. Otherwise, genuine donor is not interested in the tax benefit. So remember that particularly advertisement or sponsorship, there is no relevance of ATG. That one has to be careful about it.
Okay, I think all the questions are over, sir.
Yes, thank you.
I now request our Phadke sir to formally give the vote of thanks.
Sir,
Yes,
sir,
before we conclude,
can I ask one question?
Yes,
but
sir. Go ahead.
I must conclude by formally thanking all of you for giving me this opportunity. And
Sir, last question from my side.
and you will approach somebody for disciplinary cases. Therefore, don't take that risk in the sense because if you are not giving proper advice, and I again appeal to you, give your advice in writing right now today itself. You give the advice to the trustees that if they don't come in time, you will not be responsible for the consequence. So mention all this, that you have to do so many things in time, otherwise you will be suffering. And you are not responsible for that because there are many complaints coming in the context of the trust. Anyway, now thank you very much.
sir.
Adhapak sir.
Sir, just one small question. Presently, there is one condonation of delay scheme going on under section 119, and delay is getting condoned for late submission of Form 10, Form 10B, 9A, and all that. So, can you please throw some light on that?
Actually, they should have, because this came from 2016. Actually, that provision that it should be in time and all. But unfortunately, the government is also petty, mean-minded thing. There are human lapses. There could be either because of the ignorance or because of practical difficulties. Also, there could be delays. But they could have been generously. Actually, they should have allowed this condonation to all. Now they have given discretion to the CITs, and CITs, you know how they function. So then everybody will have to be. They have been given discretion to see whether there was a reasonable cause. And reasonable cause means everything, lot of paperwork, lot of unnecessary litigation is taking place. But now I think I am told that they have taken something like a liberal policy decision that whosoever has applied, they are giving condonation. But very few people have actually received that condonation order. In my, out of some 50, 60, only 2 or 3 condonation orders have been received. But I was told that even though condonation orders were not received, they are still assessed it as if the condonation has been done. But actually, this 119 provision or otherwise was already there in the Act. There was no necessity for having this circular, because condonation of power is already given to the Commissioner of Income Tax under the section 119. Actually, what CBDT should have ideally done is that to grant generously the condonation, which they have not done. That is why this all headache has happened.
Sir,
Thank you.
one more question, last question. Sir, this time limit extended audit and all or due to COVID, that will apply to the trust audit as well, I believe.
Yeah. Yes.
So instead of September, we can do for October like tax audit and all we do for it. Thank you, sir.
Welcome. Thanks and Jai Hind.
Jai Hind, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. You have spared your valuable time and as usual cleared all doubts of our members. You have also guided us how to guide the trustees and get the compliances for in case of charitable trust. I wholeheartedly thank once again and request all the members to carry it with loud applause.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I also thank the